Today we will be talking about the four main bonsai techniques used to make this tree look like a 300-year-old pine growing out of a rock. Each of these techniques have their own purpose, but when combined together, they form a complete language that any bonsai artist can use to express themselves through their trees. So let's jump right into it with a little help from my friend Pine. Here is a summary table of all the techniques we'll be discussing today. First up, we have Nabari development. A healthy Nabari is essential for a mature-looking bonsai. You see, developing a thick and robust Nabari can enhance the overall balance of the tree by lowering its center of gravity. This is particularly important for pines because they naturally grow tall and lanky without regular trimming. By keeping the base of the tree wider than the top, we are able to reduce the perceived height of the tree. The result is a more mature and stable-looking bonsai. Secondly, we have defoliation. Removing all the needles off the tree is an incredibly powerful technique. It might seem counterintuitive, but by removing all the foliage, we actually stimulate the tree to produce more branches. Not only that, but those new branches will be much finer and the leaves on them will also be much smaller. We'll talk more about this later, but this is one of the most useful techniques in our arsenal. Next, we have partial defoliation. This technique is not as extreme as full defoliation, but we do remove a large portion of the needles on the tree. Why would we do this? Well, you see, in nature, the outer canopy of a tree receives the most sunlight, which allows it to grow larger and produce thicker branches. Conversely, the inner canopy of the tree receives far less sunlight, resulting in thinner, weaker branches and smaller leaves. Now, if we were to simply prune out some of the outer branches, we would expose the inner canopy to more light. This results in improved growth and vigor of the inner branches while maintaining the overall shape of the tree. In addition, it also makes the tree appear more healthy and alive. And last but certainly not least, we have Jin-shari and Sabamiki. These three terms all refer to different ways of exposing the roots or the trunk of the tree. And I'm sure you've seen how a lot of people try to incorporate this into their bonsai by carving out sections of the trunk or by adding artificial roots. But there is a much easier and healthier way to develop Jin, Shari, and Saba, and that is through pruning. By strategically pruning the branches, we can reveal the hidden beauty of the roots and the trunk. The exposed wood can then be allowed to age naturally over time, developing a beautiful silver color and a rough texture that looks so aged and gnarly. These three techniques are used in almost every bonsai style, and they form a complete language that any bonsai artist can use to express themselves through their trees. But when used in combination with each other, they become an incredibly powerful tool that can transform any tree into a piece of living art. Let's start with Nabari development. You see, in nature, the base of a tree's trunk is usually wider than the top. This is because the tree has had decades or even centuries to grow a wider Nabari. As a result, the tree appears more stable and mature. Now, to achieve this in bonsai, we need to apply a technique called root pruning. By regularly pruning the roots, we prevent them from growing too long and wild. This encourages the roots to grow in a compact and dense cluster, forming a nice wide Nabari. The ideal time to perform root pruning is during the dormant season, typically in late winter or early spring. You see, during this time, the tree is not actively growing, so it is much more resilient to root pruning. However, we still want to be careful and avoid damaging the delicate root tips, so we only prune the longer and thicker roots. The remaining fine roots should be left intact as they are responsible for absorbing water and nutrients for the tree. If pruned excessively, this can weaken the tree and cause it to die. Now you might be wondering why I didn't prune the roots closer to the trunk. That's because the roots at the base of the trunk are responsible for anchoring the tree in place. If we prune them too aggressively, the tree may become unstable and prone to falling over. Instead, we focus on pruning the longer and thinner roots that are growing outwards. And speaking of pruning the roots, we don't just prune them once. Depending on the age and health of your tree, you may need to prune the roots multiple times a year. With young, newly potted trees, it is common to perform root pruning every couple of months. As the tree matures, the frequency of root pruning can be reduced. But regardless of the tree's age, it is crucial to prune the roots at least once a year to keep them under control. Moving on to defoliation. This is probably the most controversial technique out there, but believe me, it is not as complicated as it seems. The idea behind defoliating your bonsai is to encourage the tree to grow more branches and create a bushier appearance. And yes, it will also stimulate the growth of more leaves after you remove the existing ones, but that is not the primary goal. You see, by removing all the leaves, we are essentially tricking the tree into thinking it has been heavily pruned. In response to this perceived threat, the tree activates its dormant buds, resulting in more branches and a fuller canopy. Defoliation works best on young, vigorous growing trees. It is not recommended to defoliate old or unhealthy trees, as it can cause them to decline and die. The first step to defoliating your bonsai is to saturate the soil with water. This can be done by watering the tree thoroughly or even submerging it in water for a few minutes. This step is important because it prevents the tree from drying out during the defoliation process. Next, we begin removing the foliage starting from the outer canopy and moving towards the center. It's important to work systematically so that we don't miss any branches. The best time to defoliate your bonsai is during the active growing season, typically in late spring or early summer. During this time, the tree is actively growing, so it will respond more vigorously to defoliation. However, if you live in a hot climate, it is best to perform defoliation in the morning or evening to prevent the tree from drying out. Now, despite what some people say, you should absolutely fertilize your tree before and after defoliation. In fact, fertilizing your tree before defoliation can help improve its tolerance to this stressful process. Moving on to partial defoliation. You see, in nature, the outer canopy of a tree receives more sunlight, which allows it to grow larger and produce thicker branches. Conversely, the inner canopy of the tree receives far less sunlight, resulting in thinner, weaker branches and smaller leaves. Now, if we were to simply prune out some of the outer branches, we would expose the inner canopy to more light. This results in improved growth and vigor of the inner branches while maintaining the overall shape of the tree. In addition, it also makes the tree appear more healthy and alive. Now, the ideal time to perform partial defoliation is during the active growing season, typically in late spring or early summer. At this time, the tree is actively growing and will respond more vigorously to the defoliation. It is also important to note that the amount of defoliation required will vary depending on the tree species and the amount of sunlight it receives. For example, a pine tree that grows in a shaded area will require more defoliation than a pine tree that grows in a sunny area. Regardless, it is generally recommended to remove no more than 1/3 of the tree's foliage at a time. This allows the tree to maintain its health while still receiving enough sunlight for photosynthesis. And lastly, we have Jin, Shari, and Sabamiki. To develop Jin, Shari, and Sabamiki, we first need to understand the concept of negative space. Negative space refers to the areas between the branches and the trunk of the tree. The goal is to prune away any branches that interfere with the negative space, allowing the viewer's eye to appreciate the natural beauty of the trunk and the roots. This creates a more dynamic and interesting visual composition. Now, to identify which branches to prune, we need to look at the overall shape of the tree and identify any branches that disrupt the flow or balance of the composition. Branches that are too close together or those that cross each other should be pruned to create more open and airy negative space. Additionally, We want to ensure that the remaining branches are strong and healthy, as they will be more visible with the removed branches gone. Once we have identified the branches to be pruned, we can proceed with the removal. It is important to make clean cuts just above a leaf or branch node to minimize damage to the tree. This will allow the tree to heal quickly and promote new growth in the desired direction. By following these steps and consistently applying them over time, you can develop a healthy and mature-looking bonsai with a thick nabari, fine branching, and exposed roots. And if you want to learn how to style this pine, check out the video right here.